Hey everybody, welcome to the studio of Carini Arts. Join me on Facebook and Instagram. I am revisiting a lot of the topics from my past artist talks. I'm trying to come back to them with shorter versions. This topic tends to be one that's hard to keep super short, but I will do my best, which sometimes is questionable. But today we're going to talk about just some general tips on pricing and selling your art. And first and foremost, I want to say that not only what I'm giving you, but in general, it's always guidelines. They're not rules. There are no firm rules that you need to follow when it comes to this stuff. So never feel like you are trapped or pigeonholed and that you can't adjust what you're doing. But first and foremost, you need to think about your goal. So whether you're doing it for a hobby or you're doing it for a career, you need to take these into consideration. And if you are just starting to price your art for the first time, there are a number of things to consider. So I'm going to break this up into a couple different sections because there's just a lot of key points, and I want to hit as many as I can as quickly as possible. So some things you're going to want to consider are your material costs. So if you're somebody that does miniatures, like little miniature canvases, which I did at one point, your costs are going to be low. You're not going to need a lot of paint. You're not going to need a lot of storage space, and your canvases are going to cost next to nothing. Miniatures are a great way to work when you need to minimize your overhead and you don't have a lot of resources. So not everybody has the resources to work in the grand mediums or to work on big paintings. Like even the big paintings I have here, they're a difficult sell because not a lot of people can afford them. Not a lot of people have space for them. They take up a lot of room in here and they are easy to damage. And then if I need to ship them, shipping is astronomical. So we'll get to that in a bit, but just things to consider. You need to consider, as I just mentioned, your operating costs and your overhead. So, are you working from home? So, if you're working from home in a small little corner, you're not going to have a lot of additional operating costs. If you're getting a studio outside of your space or you're renting a gallery space, your numbers could jump up dramatically. Now, if you're paying 10 times as much for these resources, well, guess what? In theory, you have to find a way to generate 10 times the revenue to cover that. So, if you're really just getting started and you're trying to navigate this and make this be something sustainable, work on minimizing your overhead. And when I first left the workforce and quit my job and said I was never going back to it, that's what I focused on was cutting out a lot of the fluff and the things that I didn't need to do, learning to work with minimal resources and the things that I had at hand, maybe things I hadn't used, working on a smaller scale, working with recycled materials, and I reevaluated my pricing structure so that I could focus on moving more work. So we'll get into that too. And then the other thing that I mentioned a second ago was shipping. So shipping can be an astronomical cost. I shipped a piece last year that cost me $1,200 to ship. That did not include the painting. It was $1,200 to ship the piece because with my work, I have to use a professional art shipper. So they got to pick up, crate, ship, and insure the work. And that gets to be a hefty cost. So a lot of times, what I'll do is I will factor shipping into my pricing and I will factor in a generalized price based on years of experience selling work across the country and even internationally, and I'll make sure that it covers the vast majority of that. And I may just take a little less money on some projects and a little bit more on others. If it's somebody that picks up locally, I can maybe throw them a discount or throw in some bonus gifts, stuff like that. But what I have found is that people like an all-in price. A lot of times people don't like to hear, oh, well, it costs this, and then it's going to be $1,200 for shipping. That could be the thing that throws it off. But if you factored that in, and you're like, well, this is the cost, and it includes the crating and shipping, which is, and you can let them know, which is $1,200. That could radically change the dialogue and sometimes be the closer for you. So just something to consider there. And then, like I said, if it's somebody that's local, maybe I throw them some bonus gifts, or some projects you just make a little more on, some you make a little bit less on. The other thing you're going to have to consider is, are you showing in person and doing shows? Like, are you doing a festival circuit where it requires you to pay a booth fee? Or are you showing in galleries? Or are you primarily showing online? Now, if you're showing online, your overhead costs are going to be nominal. You can focus a lot on advertising, but you got to find a way to move the work. But you're not really transporting stuff. You're saving a lot of time. You're not damaging stuff, and you're not paying for booths. Now, if you're doing like the art fairs and festivals, are you doing the ones that cost $500 to participate? Are you getting a multi booth setup that's costing you, $1,000, $1,500? Are you hiring a helper? Are you having to make signage, things like that, that can drastically add up very quickly. Or are you doing the art fairs and festivals like the major ones in New York and Miami and other cities that are costing 5, 10 grand a booth? Now, I tried those for a bit because I wanted to feel like I was a big player in the game, and it was fun to do and to be able to say that I did it. But looking back, was it a good investment? Aside from the experience and the knowledge gained from it, no, it really wasn't. That money could have gone to so many other places in a better way. And I learned the lesson, but I'm glad that I got to try it. But now I can share that with you. Now, if you're able to sell your work there and you make the money, or even on the back end, because a lot of times when I do those things, the money comes on the back end, sometimes years later. But can you wait for that money to come in? Can you wait for years to see the return on your investment? So things to consider there. So cost of shows. And then when you're dealing with a gallery, as opposed to selling on your own, generally the rule of thumb is that it's 50% for the gallery. So pricing in such a way that when you cut that in half, what do the numbers look like then? So these are going to be things as you start to develop those relationships. If that's a road you go down, that you're going to have to think about. So, in terms of setting costs, if you are new to pricing your artwork, and I think that this is what a lot of people are probably coming to seek guidance on, a couple of suggestions I have are to look at other artists that are similar to you. So, not just in terms of size, style, experience, across the board. You're never going to find anybody that's exactly you, but find somebody that's kind of similar and look how they're pricing things. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to use that you have to go with that, but at least it gives you a baseline to know what somebody else is doing, and you can kind of gauge their success to a sense, because it's really hard to gauge success because there's so many different variables involved, and it could be a matter of their connections and whatnot, because a lot of times it's just you need one particular door open for everything to kind of line up. So again, I'll kind of get into things that will dive into that a bit more in a minute. You're going to want to take into consideration the size of your work. So again, are you working really large, in which case that you have to deal with those shipping costs? So those are things you're going to be have to factoring. And in that case, the quality of your work. How long have you been doing it? Are you not necessarily do you have art school experience, but are you far enough along that you feel that your work presents in a professional manner? So not necessarily are you a seasoned pro, but are you presenting your work in a professional manner? Are you working with professional materials, or at least presenting them in professional quality? So things of that nature. And ultimately, what it comes down to is you have to consider your goals. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to just break even and keep doing this? Do you have another job where the money doesn't really even make a difference? Or are you doing this for a living where you have to turn a profit? Because if you have to turn a profit, it will drastically change the dialogue and the conversation and things that you have to take into consideration. You're also going to want to take into consideration your selling history. Now, if you haven't sold your work before, you don't have a selling history. So guess what? You can just start wherever the hell you want to start. You can literally put your finger up and say, I'm going to price this at this, see if somebody buys it, and then you can adjust from there. Nobody has experience until you have experience. So you have to start somewhere. But you can look at other people with selling histories that are comparable to yours. So that goes back to what I was talking about, looking at other artists. And you have to think about what's right for you. Like, what are your goals? What do you want to do with this? Is your goal really even about selling? So the right answer for one person is going to be the wrong answer for somebody else. So again, it comes down to the idea that these are guidelines, they are not rules. Some people will try to tell you that there's rules for this, but rules are meant to be broken, and we're artists and we can do whatever the hell we want. So I am here to give you carte blanche to do whatever you please. So on that note, my next note was do what makes you feel satisfied. So yes, do what makes you feel good. If you feel satisfied, it's going to make you want to continue. It's going to want to make you continuing to pursue this and to dive further into it, to learn more about it. And I think that a lot of people just feel deterred by the idea of selling their work. There's a lot of people that make work, that make quality work, that have people that want to buy their work, but they don't want to start having these conversations because they don't want to have to sell themselves or sell their work because they don't like that aspect of it. Now, I didn't either for a long time, but I realized that if I wanted this to be sustainable, that nobody was going to be able to sell my work better than me. So if you can be a little flexible and learn to do that, if nothing else, until you get to a point that you find somebody that can sell the work for you, You can learn to negotiate and to have better dialogue with the people that will be selling your work. So these are very good things to learn about and to know about, if for no other reason than to just have the knowledge in the back of your mind. Now, I do want to say that things change constantly. So even me, a seasoned professional artist that does this full time, I will have months where things are just flying off the shelves. Money's coming in. I'm feeling like a baller. And then I will have months, like literal months, seasons that pass where like nothing comes in. And I'm like, well, gee, am I doing something wrong? And I have learned from doing this enough years that no, it's the nature of what I do. I can be creative, I can make adjustments, but it's how it is. Sometimes things sell. Sometimes when things are selling, that's when other people want it. I have noticed that when things really start to move, it does drive up demand. It's a psychological thing, if nothing else, but on a subconscious level, that triggers people to start buying stuff. So it's a very real thing. So sometimes, in order to get sales, you just need to start getting sales to get more of those sales. So, how do you get them initially? Well, you got to try things and keep experimenting until it works. And what happens too often is it doesn't work for people, and so they stop. And for me, I have always lived by the starving artist mentality, the idea that I am always hungry because I know that my pools may dry up. And so I am always, even when I'm having my successes, planting seeds for tomorrow when things dry up. So I would encourage you to do the same and to not get discouraged if things slow, because I will tell you firsthand that I have major lulls consistently. And I am somebody that does this full time for a living. So don't let that deter you. And you just really need to find ways to fill in the gaps. So I have my e-commerce store, I have my canvas prints. So by having the prints at a more affordable price point, it allows me to have an option for everybody to potentially afford. I added payment plans, and that allows me to elevate the prices of my originals. So this now there's a tier system. So pricey originals, and you can get those on payment plans all the way down to canvas prints that you can get and everything in between. So by having those options, it creates an entire spectrum, and I find that it helps me with building sustainability. And you can play with the pricing, you can see what works for you. You can offer discounts, you can offer promo codes, you can offer freebies, you can offer giveaways, you can offer free shipping. Like I mentioned, I find that that's something that works well for me. What I do want to say is don't be afraid to try things, to experiment, and to maybe mess up and learn a few lessons. You may, like I said, in my case, there's some projects that I lost money on, there's projects that I made some money on, and there's projects that I made a lot of money on. And it all kind of balanced out. But I'm glad that I tried all the different things to find out what worked for me. And what worked for me one month may not have worked the following month. And what didn't work one month may have worked the following month. So you can't get too hung up on those things. You just have to always be driving to find creative solutions when things are slow. But if you're passionate, if you're determined, if you keep going, if you're willing to outlast, you can absolutely make it work. If you want to make a living doing this, you very well can. Is it easy? No, it's not. But nothing that is worthwhile is ever easy. So if I can do it, you can do it too. And if you have not done this before, again, don't be afraid to get started. I know so often people say that they're not ready, but nobody's ever really ready. Sometimes you just got to take a jump. And if you feel like you're not ready to sell your work, it might be the time to start, because the sooner you get used to the discomfort, the sooner you can get comfortable with that discomfort, you can start building up your confidence in selling your work. So even if your friends are looking to buy your work and they're looking to pay $5, $10, $20 for it, start gaining that experience wherever you can. And you just use it as an opportunity to learn a lesson and to grow and to start gradually trying different tactics. Try these tactics on your friends, try these tactics on your family. I had to dive into sales for many years to become the artist and salesman for my work that I am now. Did I want to do it? No, I didn't want to do it. I wanted a gallery to sell my work, but I thought that if I worked with a gallery, that it would take care of everything. And I learned some hard lessons that I can now share with you. But I do find that a lot of it just comes down to confidence. If you project an air of confidence, even if you're just pretending, even if you are acting, if you say, this is $100, this is $200, this is $500. If you firmly say, as opposed to, oh, I don't really know how to price this, if you just say, this is what it is, I find that people will take you at your word. Oftentimes, they will not question you, and if they do, it gives you an opportunity to then have a dialogue with them, but it gives you a starting point. So just do your best to, even if you have to learn to act and pretend until you actually develop that sense of confidence, give it a shot. But you're never going to sell your work until you start selling your work. So give it a shot, give it a try. Don't be afraid to take the leap. And if I can provide additional guidance, let me know. I'll try to. Let me know what you think in the comments. You can share your thoughts. You guys can continue the dialogue. You can help each other because we are not competing. We are all in this together. So other artists are not your competition. I want to see other artists do well too. I do my best to help other artists in my gallery with their sales too. It's not taking away from my sales, in my opinion. It's not how I see it. I try to take care of people, and in turn, I'm hoping that people will take care of me. So I hope that I have helped to take care of you. Feel free to share this with your friends, with your groups. Tell people about me because I suck on YouTube, but I'm trying to suck a little bit less. And join me on Facebook and Instagram. I'll see you next time.